Hello to you and welcome to Formerly on 4. I'm Jackie Walker and I was formerly on 4 as the news anchor here for more than 40 years. I'm still with the station. I still do things like writing and this kind of thing, reporting in this way. But this podcast was my idea because I worked with so many great people over the years, and I get asked about them all the time. So I want you to see what they're up to right now. With me is Dan Holland, one of the finest photographers and editors that this city has ever seen. He's helping me get things rolling as we head off to Shelburne, Vermont today to say hello to a longtime friend and former colleague, Wadi Sawabini. Hello, Wadi.
Hello, it's good to be with you, Jackie. How's everything?
Everything is great and better now that you are here. For people who don't know, Wadi, what 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 years were you here at Channel 4? And what was your
Oh,
job title? What were you known
okay.
for?
Well, I was at Channel 4 from March of 1982 until December of 1990, and I was specifically hired to, quote, beef up the 11 o'clock news. Joe Keurig wanted somebody who would come in and enterprise stories and give people an interest, a need, a reason to watch the 11 o'clock news. The video being played right here now is of the very famous uh, standoff. And here's a piece of hopping the road, hopping
Yeah.
the train
We're going
to.
to talk about all these,
Oh,
Wadi. These are great
okay.
stories that you were involved with here. I want to get a little more background on you right now. Why are you coming to us from Vermont? How long have you lived there?
Well, I was born and raised in Vermont. My Mary was raised in Vermont. And I started my broadcast career here in Vermont. And so when it was comfortable, our children were up and out of the house. Mary and I returned to Vermont to care for aging, ailing parents, my mom and dad and her mom. And it was just the right thing to do. And of course, we love living here. We're about 4 minutes from our grandkids. So there's a big draw.
That is a big draw, absolutely. So you had three children, and they're all grown up and doing wonderful things now. And how many grandchildren?
We have two grandchildren. And as I say, it's a boy and a girl, and they live just minutes away. We have three adult children. Our youngest is Jacob. He's on the right in this screen. He is a professional chef in New York City, a personal chef as well. He's worked at a lot of very fancy restaurants. The foodies in your audience may know them: Gary Danko, La Bernardin Crew. He worked at the front of the house for Wiley Dufresne. And then after leaving the restaurant business, he and his wife opened a distillery, and they made incredible gin, written up in all the magazines, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. And then, of course, COVID sort of put them out.
Yeah.
Our middle child, Annie, is a manager for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Perhaps you've heard of the Chincoteague Pony Auction and Pony Swim. Uh, Annie is the manager for that Federal Reserve, Wildlife Reserve, as well as for three other reserves. So she's a big shot at the Fish and Wildlife
Great.
Service. And our oldest on the left here is Issa, and Issa runs his own sports marketing company here in Vermont. So Mary and I are very proud of our three kids. They're just wonderful, and we see them all the time.
With good reason to be proud of them, Wadi. I want to ask you something about people who don't know you are going to be looking at your name and going, Wadi Sawabini, what kind of a name is that? You started in this business, as I did, at a time when everybody had to be pretty vanilla. Everybody had to be the same. And I'm wondering, did anybody along the way in management ask you to change your name?
Yes, I've been at Channel 3 in Burlington for 8 years, and it was time to move on. And news directors in Rhode Island, in Texas, and I believe St. Louis all said you can have a job if you'll adopt a more plain name, Bill Smith. And
You're
I'm of
no Bill
Arabic
Smith.
no, I'm of Arabic heritage, and my dad was Wadi Sawabini, and I'm Wadi Sawabini. My name actually has an apostrophe on the end of it, which changes it from Wadi to Adia. growing up in Burlington, Vermont, no one knew what the apostrophe was. So I was called Wadi like my dad. But Wadi means kind and merciful. I'm sorry, Wadia means kind and merciful. Wadi means dry gully or gulch.
Oh,
So
there's a
I'm
big
neither.
difference there. That's great. All right, Wadi, I want to talk to you a little bit about your reporting career here because you were so well known in this community. And I was anchoring the 11 o'clock news when you were part of the night team here. So I remember all the stories, and we've talked about that. But I think one of the most prominent stories that you were assigned to and that you covered for years was Peggy Say and her brother, who had been taken captive, Terry Anderson. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, Peggy Say, before she became internationally known, was a Batavia housewife, and she was an amazing person. She fought tirelessly to win the freedom for her brother Terry Anderson. She went all over the world. She went to dangerous places like Syria and Lebanon, trying to get him freed. Mike Mombre Jr. and I were her shadow. We went to Cyprus, we went to Greece, we went to the White House, we went to Germany several times, and she was just an incredible person.
Now,
Absolute
Mike,
energy.
you mentioned Mike Mombre Jr. Now, he's a name very well known to us. One of the finest photographers that any of us have ever worked with, and who retired just a couple of years ago here from Channel 4. But that kind of thing, you too, traveling all over the country, all over the world to cover this story, you don't see that a lot anymore at the local level. That was really a
No,
time when we were allowed to travel globally.
yes. And I think that CBS came in and helped Channel 4 with some of the travel expenses because Mike and I would file our reports via satellite. And some of the reports we did for the CBS Morning News. But Jackie, in Cyprus, you went to a nondescript building. You you sent your story up to a satellite 22,000 miles in space, and it went down to London. And then in London, it went back up 22,000 miles to go to New York. And then in New York, they bounced it again to get it to Buffalo. So it was a lifetime experience. I enjoyed every bit of it. It was tough on my family because I wasn't home. And sometimes I got no notice that we were leaving. One Halloween, I called Mary and said, "Sweetheart, I can't take the children trick or treating."
Oh,
And she said, "Why not?" And I said, "Well, I'm headed to Germany." She said, "When will you be home?" And I said, "Sweetheart, I have no idea." And to this day, my children remind me every time Halloween comes around, "Dad, do you remember the Halloween you didn't take us trick or treating?"
oh, kids don't forget things like that, Waddy. They don't
No, no,
forget.
they don't.
But this
No.
was such a memorable story. And of course, it ended with Terry Anderson being eventually, after years, being released. And Peggy Say always stood in this community as someone who never, ever, ever let the country forget her brother and what he was going through. And she has since
She was
passed away. But
she was one heck of a sister. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, she did that. Now, I want to talk about other stories here because we talked about this a little bit ahead of time, ones that we remember. Let's head out to the Great Lakes and climb aboard a ship. This was you, there you are, right there in the hold of the ship before all the grain was dumped in there. This was ferrying grain on the Great Lakes.
This is the Ernest Star Breach. It was a Ford Rouge steel ship, and it carried the equivalent of several hundred railroad boxcars of grain from Superior Duluth to the Buffalo Mills. It was another one of these amazing stories. The photographer on this job is Dan Somerville, who I know you know well.
Yes.
Dan just went out of his way. He really got into this. We flew from Buffalo to Superior Duluth. We got a chance to get on a Coast Guard ship to film the Ernest R. Breach coming in. This is how big the holds are. This shot right here. It's just amazing. And they fill it to the roof with grain. And there are 4 or 5 uh, cargo holds that size. Um, I thought it was important because this steam shipping keeps the mills in Buffalo able to compete with other places because the cost of transportation via ship is cheaper than railroad cars. And of course, it's only seasonal. I mean, we happened to ride the first trip of the year. We actually broke ice to get into the Sioux Locks at Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. But
It's-
another experience, um, and Dan Somerville, geez, that guy.
and
These shots are just amazing. I mean,
he
here's a cargo hold being opened. Dan had already climbed down into the hold so that when they pulled the hatch, he had that shot.
Yeah, that was at a time when you didn't see photography like this very often. I want to move on to another one that you said at the time this was the largest Cattaraugus County manhunt in this area.
Yes.
And it was for a man named James Swan, who was a suspected police killer.
He's a convicted cop killer. Convicted.
Well, in part of the story, I saw it said suspected and then it said convicted. But here he is. He escaped. And tell us what happened, Wadi.
Well, keep in mind that in that era, we were very competitive. I woke up every morning with a mission to beat the other two stations in town. And when this story started, I felt really almost defeated because Channel 7 claimed they had Swan in their helicopter and was flying him back to Cattaraugus County. Wrong guy. So Jay Lowder and Ray Swan and I took off for Cattaraugus County. And in those days, we all had handheld police radios. And Ray Swan is in another life, he was a Renaissance man. He can do everything.
Yeah.
And so we were out running around with the cops, and we are the only people who have this video. And it made me very proud. I worked with Jay Lowder and Ray Swan, and we kicked butt, plainly. Nobody else had this video.
Yeah, and I'm hearing in your voice there the excitement of having this video that nobody else had. Because I want to point out to people that back then, and this is now we're talking in the 80s, this was late 80s, right?
Yep.
There was such a feeling of competition among the three stations here in Buffalo and across the country, in any market when they had different stations. There was great competition in order to get that story and get the information and get it on the air and be the first. And you were so proud of that. Competition is so important, and we're losing that, I think. Certainly we're losing it with newspapers. We've seen what's happened with them. And there's, the situation is happening now with television stations as well.
I may have come across as being pretty aggressive a few minutes ago. That competition was in good heart. I mean, I competed against the Channel 7 reporters and Ed Caldwell at Channel 2. But at the end, we'd sit in the newsroom and watch the other 11 o'clock
Yes.
newses. And in fact, in those days, the station 4 recorded 2 and 7, so we could see how we did. And
And in those days, Wadi, which doesn't happen like this anymore, we would all stand in the newsroom and watch the three monitors for all three stations, watch what the competition was doing and what we did, and then afterwards, after the news was over, we'd stand there and talk about it. How did we do? What could we do better? What happened in this situation? Those were great learning experiences.
And the exclusives were just incredible. There's a shot there of the standoff in downtown over the neon sculpture. When the two sides, the cops and the artists, wanted to get together, Joe Ader, who was a fantastic photographer, suggested they sit in our news car.
Yeah, now wait a second. Before you get too far, we've got the video of this story, and we need to set it up here because this video is amazing. This is something that happened back in the 1980s, and it was a sculpture that was erected in downtown Buffalo. There's the artist, Billy Lawless, called Green Lightning. And what you saw was just like this. You didn't see it with the lights on. But once the lights went on and you saw
It was
what
obscene.
was obscene, yes.
It was obscene.
And Mayor Griffin was understandably upset once he saw what he saw. And then there was a standoff with the Vice Squad. I thought that was amazing that we had the Vice Squad out there for this story. Tell us about that, Wadi.
All right. So Joe Ader and I came to work on the afternoon shift, and Joe's driving the car, and we heard on the radio that they wanted more cops down at this green space. And so we went down, and holy smokes, this thing is lit up, and it is it's obscene. We don't need to go into it. And so the next day, the Vice Squad goes back with a couple of pieces of heavy machinery and a cutting torch, and they're getting ready to cut it up, dismantle it. And the artist climbs to the top of the sculpture and won't come down. And so it's a standoff between his lawyer and the cops. And the head of the Vice Squad got into our news vehicle. We let him use our cell phone. And this was very new. In those days, it wasn't a handheld phone. It wasn't even a bag phone. It was a big brick of a transmitter that got put in the trunk of your vehicle.
Yeah.
So they're using our phone in our car. We're getting shots. We own the story. And it was just a wonderful day. Afterwards,
Well,
Joe Ader was just amazing photographer, and he has shots that nobody else has.
yeah, in terms of competition, it was a wonderful day. This was, I think, a very memorable day in this community for people who were alive back then and who remember what this was all about. But it was something.
I have no idea how the artist thought that the city would put up with what is dramatized in the neon sculpture. But
Well, Billy was making a statement there, and of course, there were a lot of statements made after that when the whole thing went to court and that kind of thing. But a very, very interesting story.
And I have another quick Joe Ader story. Joe and I were covering the crack wars on Buffalo's east side when there was a series of drive-by shootings.
Okay, we've got a little video of this, Wadi, here. It's dark, but this is Joe taking the pictures at night. There were drug wars going on in Buffalo, and so this was not an unusual situation, but it turned into a very unusual interview, right? You were interviewing one of these people.
We were interviewing one of the men who claimed he had been beat up, and here comes a car down the street firing shots. It's a drive-by shooting. I'm behind the police car digging for China, and I look up and I see Joe Ader with one knee with his camera mounted on the hood of the police car, and he's getting the drive-by shooter as he goes by. And I'm trying to pull him down. Joe, get down. Joe, please, for God's sakes, get down. He says, I got the shot. And he did. Later, we're outside where the drive-by shooter was supposed to have been holed up, and we shot video without lights. We got back to the station. Of course, I sound like I'm tooting my own horn, but Channel 4 exclusive. And one of the guys in the back room said, "Hey, did you put in for hazardous duty pay?" And Joe and I looked at each other and said, "Geez, I never thought about that." So we went to the news director, and he actually gave us hazardous duty pay
Really?
for being there under gunfire.
You may have been the only one who got hazardous duty pay here, but
no.
But that brings up something that when I was watching your video, you had back then, or we all did at those times, incredible access. Police would allow you to get close, to come up, they always had their police line, but a lot closer than we can these days. And you had a lot more, I think, cooperation. Well, I don't want to say cooperation, but it was like they tolerated you a little bit more back then and let you shoot things.
In those days, you could walk in Buffalo City Police Headquarters, you'd nod at the desk sergeant because he knew who you were, and you could go up and talk to the chief of homicide, or you could go up and talk to the chief of vice. And it just was standard operating procedure. For years, there was a press room in the Buffalo Police Headquarters, and the Courier Express and the Buffalo News had full-time reporters in the press room.
That's right.
And we didn't have any, anchorage there, but we could go in and talk to them, tell them what we were doing. They would share. Sometimes they would share with us. But in those days, Jackie, after at the 11 o'clock news, we'd go stand outside the Courier Express and wait for the Bulldog edition to see if we'd beat them. I mean, that they had 5 or 6 reporters on a story, and Channel 4 might have had 2 reporters and 2 photographers. So if we had a scoop in the Bulldog edition, we were we were feeling pretty good about the whole evening.
Now,
But
you bring up the Courier Express, which reminds us all again about this issue of competition. Back then, the Buffalo News and the Courier Express were in competition, and also with all the stations in town, the 3 stations in town. Why, in your mind, as a veteran reporter, is competition important?
well, it brings out the best in people. I wanted to make sure that I had as many accurate facts, that I had every aspect of the story, the victim side, the cop side. I was looking to as thorough and as quickly as possible. And keep in mind that unlike the newspaper, with television, our viewers had one chance to hear and see the story. So we always tried to do the quickest, best job we could while being factually accurate. The newspapers could give you 3 or 4 paragraphs and subtle, backstory. We didn't have time for that. I mean, Vic Baker, who was our 11 o'clock producer for years, used to say, if the world comes to an end, I'm going to give you 1 minute and 20 seconds to tell the story. And, and,
And you know what? You would do it too.
and those were the facts. I mean, so I loved my time in Buffalo. The restaurants, Chef Tony Sheary's baked stuffed fish on Friday, Joe's on Niagara Street. It was just a great place. And so if you went to Joe's on most night, uh, weekday evenings, you'd see Commissioner Dagenhart and his wife in
Yeah.
eating their dinner.
Yeah,
And so after a bit, after they finished their dessert, you might go over and say, "Good evening, Commissioner, Mrs. Dagenhart," and the commissioner might say, "Hi, Wadi, what's going on?" And you might be able to pose a question, "Commissioner, could you?" And we were polite and we wanted to give them space, but Tony
sure.
Sheary's, the people in Kenmore and North Tonawanda, they would eat there on Fridays. Uh, Ray Swan and I couldn't get through a shift without going to Tony Sheary's on Friday. It was a great town to work in news. People were wonderful. Um, I didn't have the average name. People remembered my name. People
Sure.
would call and say, "Hey, I want to talk to that big Italian guy on TV." You know,
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Your career here, and you were here 8 years, led into your next career, which was not in television news, but it was related. Tell us about that, Wadi.
well, when I started in Burlington, Vermont, we shot our own film. And because film was very expensive, you learned to edit in the camera. And we used something called the elements of film continuity or the elements of continuity. Here, we're showing you that's my first camera on the left. It's a film camera. It had a 3 minute capacity, 100 feet of black and white film. And to the right is one of the newer Sony camcorders. They still make something very similar, but that was the first consumer camera that saw in the dark. And so it had a real application when I moved to law enforcement. After I lost my job at Channel 4, I discovered that no one was teaching cops how to shoot evidence grade video. And so using the elements of video continuity, knowing how to turn off the sound, because at a crime scene, someone might say something that later proved inaccurate. The first deduction about what had happened wasn't accurate. So I started teaching, I started a 3-day course. This is a class at the San Clemente Border Patrol checkpoint on I-5 in California. Those are all U.S. Border Patrol agents and federal agents, and they're learning how to shoot crime scenes. And it was just for 31 years, I traveled the country. This is a class. I don't remember exactly where this is, but this is there's a class of federal agents in Kansas City. I remember that shot. The photographer was told to shoot everybody's the back of these people's heads because they all worked undercover, and so it was a great time. It
So,
was a
Wadi,
3-day school.
you pretty much invented this career of teaching police officers and law enforcement officers how to use video at crime scenes, how to shoot these scenes, the things that young people today see on CSI, and of course it's gone far beyond that. But this
Right.
was the beginning of CSI, and you were right at the forefront of it.
Yes, and we kept looking for 31 years. Mary and I kept looking over our shoulders. Hey, if this is a great way to make a living, how come there's nobody else doing it? The FBI got so exasperated, they designated our company sole source supplier because they couldn't find anybody else to teach the course. There was no competition.
So you would
To this
fly
day,
around the country and teach different police departments how to use video and why it was important.
at first we flew, and then budget cuts got to the point where they wouldn't pay for the flights, and so I ended up driving. I drove a Chevy Suburban, 529,000 miles on the original engine.
Oh, man.
And Mary and I, when we sold the company, we added up all the business deductions for mileage. I drove 2.4 million miles in 31 years. My last full year, I'm telling you, my last full year in this business, teaching cops, I spent 256 nights in hotels. And then COVID hit, and we went.
Wow.
And then I
Wow.
had to teach
But
using this Zoom. So,
so
I
mu-
want you to know. I just want everybody to notice. I've got my Tim Horton coffee mug here. Just
your allegiance to this area, right? Your allegiance to this area. Wadi,
what I wouldn't give for some good chicken wings. You wouldn't eat what passes for chicken wings in Vermont.
oh, I could probably agree with you there. In the time that we have left here, I want to ask you a couple other questions, and that is, these days, and Wadi, you were really known as a run and gun reporter. I mean, when that police radio went off, you were out the door with your photographer, and I know you loved the photographers here, so many of them. These days, when you hear about big news happening, and big news does happen in Vermont,
It sure does.
do you get the urge
I have
still, or
to
is it too
stifle
far?
myself. I have to. Archie Bunker used to say, "Stifle yourself." I have to stifle myself. Otherwise, I'd find myself at the police line asking questions. No, and it's amazing because I see a lot of young reporters, and I call the station where I used to work, Channel 3. I call and coach the reporters. Who, what, when, where, why, how.
Yeah,
Every story needs who, what, when, where,
I
why,
hear
how.
you.
What? How are you missing that?
I hear you. Very
So
briefly,
yes.
Wadi, our time is short here. Could a young person today have the same type of career that you had? There have been so many changes in our business.
Boy, I hate to sound pessimistic, but I don't think the answer is yes. It's a very tough go. It's a very tough go.
Tough
There's
go.
just
But you look back on it fondly, I know, and
oh,
we look back on it fondly. Your time here, Wadi, you made such an impression, and we loved working with you. And we
thank you,
wish you
Jackie.
and Mary and the kids all the best.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to see you. Sending you both big hugs over the Zoom.
Thanks, Wadi. And that's a big hug coming from you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you for watching us on Formerly on 4. Give me a shout, Jackie.Walker at WIVB.com. Thanks for being with us today.